So Solomon Gray is a UK-based musical duo comprised of Tom Kingston and Joe Wilson. While they're known for their unique electronica soundscape as songwriters, the duo have focused on their work as composers as well. Solomon Gray was behind the BBC HBO miniseries adaptation of J.K. Rowling's The Casual Vacancy. They also composed the score for the thriller Gozo. Today I'm speaking to one half of the duo, Mr. Joe Wilson. Tom could not be here today, but Joe, thanks so much for speaking today. It's such a real pleasure.
No problem. It's an absolute pleasure.
To start, I love to ask composers, why they followed the calling to music. So what does music mean to you, and why did you pursue that path? And I guess at what point did you and Tom form this collaboration?
Well, I mean, I didn't. I grew up with my mother and my stepfather, and no one really in my family they were passionate about music, but no one really played music. And my stepfather, I think my mum met him when I was probably about 1 or 2, was absolutely passionate about jazz and classical and funk and soul, and had a record collection that kind of spread from one side of the house to the other, and loads of tapes as well. He used to give lectures on jazz and classical music as well. And because he was one of my parents, and when I grew up, he was a father figure, and he kind of passed that on to me. And Tom had a similar sort of background. Although he was playing at a much earlier age than me, I was playing quite a few little instruments, but not in depth. And Tom was playing piano and trombone at quite an early age, and a bit of guitar as well. But his father played bass, and I mean, it's normally your parents' record.
Right.
I think Tom's dad was really into Robert Wyatt, and I think they had quite a lot of off-kilter kind of weird avant-garde music in their house, and mine was and then we met up when we were about, Tom's a tiny bit older than me, and we both met in Oxford. He was at university there, and I was at school.
Oh, wow.
There, and I ended up doing an audition for a covers band. It's I'm sure it's exactly the same out there. You get a covers band together, and you can make quite a good wage by doing all the balls and all the, weddings and things like that. And especially in Oxford University, where there's just about so many different universities to juggle. When it's ball season, there's just loads and loads of gigs, and you can make about 150 a gig. Wow. So Tom, I auditioned for that band that had been going for a bit. It was like a 10-piece funk and soul band, and Tom was playing keys there, and we got on really, really well. And this is ages ago. This is like probably about 15 years ago.
Wow.
And we both sort of shared a common kind of ambition. And we're both very ambitious, and really, really wanted to start, at least trying to write and see what came out. And I think we started doing drum and bass and hip hop at first, because that was cool and as far away from middle class as we could get. and I mean, it was not intense from that period on. Like, we had lots of years where we weren't working, and if you read up about the storyline, there were lots of times when Tom was in another country and I was here, we went through periods of not writing at all. And probably about maybe 5 years ago, we started writing for Solomon Gray.
Wow.
And that's kind of the story of how we got together, really.
So at what point did you decide to try your hand at film composing? Was it something that you both wanted to do? Did it just come up kind of later and like, oh, this is something that we really connect with? Like, how did it kind of come into your guys' career?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've kind of had a bit of a history with it anyway. I'm absolutely passionate about it. I've had a long, long period of time where I've been, I'm very interested in film music. I mean, right. Tom is as well. But I think specifically Gozo came along from some of my contacts, and we took on board that kind of thriller sort of film, and found out that we could write quite quickly to picture. But I think we're both really into Vangelis, and we're really into sort of electronic composition, and then also the classical side. And we hadn't really used some of our skills in the classical side of work as much because of the pop music. And, there is loads of, theory-based stuff that goes with the pop music, but not big string arrangements to a point. There is quite a few on the album, but especially some of the sounds that we've started to use with composing, we just hadn't had the license really, or we felt like we didn't have the license. And then we did this Dahana EP for Tourism Island, which was a soundtrack to the Wild Atlantic Way. And that just kind of opened up a load of ideas sonically for us. I don't know if you know the story, but it was basically, we got a phone call about the Wild Atlantic Way is this longest coastal road in the world, actually, and it goes right across from the northwest of Ireland all the way down to South Cork. And we'd written a bit of the album out in what they call the Teardrop of Ireland off the southwest coast, where I grew up. A little bit of my childhood I spent there, and I think they liked what we wrote, and they liked the story that we'd been there, and we'd kind of finished the journey there as well, and it tied in with what we'd done before. So anyway, we ended up doing this and travelled the whole way down, bringing a portable studio with us and writing with local people and recording local sounds, and that was our first kind of foray into composing, really. And it was amazing. I've been thinking about it a load recently because I'm in Belfast right now, and I've just met up with some of the people that we did the project with, and it was great. Not to get too earnest about it, but it was lovely.
Sounds amazing, yeah.
It was incredible. Like, it's one of those few things, like, I can't believe I got to do it. Like, they were lovely people, and to meet local musicians. I don't know if it's fair to just put them all in the bracket of folk, but
yeah,
there was like local kind of Irish singers, and the instrumentation was a bit different, well, very different, and we just don't have that in Britain. And I don't know what the outside world thinks of British heritage and sort of British music, but actually we don't have that connection through our youth with like ye old kind of music as much as they still do in Ireland. Like you have a pub which is just full of 60 to 70-year-olds all listening intently and dancing and drinking and watching 18-year-olds playing their old standard folk tracks. It's incredible, and it's still passed on, and it's still they're so proud of it. Anyway, I'm getting off the track a little bit, but no, this experience was amazing, and using it was just so different, and we used that and the way that we worked to create a kind of 5-track EP. Anyway, I've completely gone off the track, but that was the first thing that kind of put us in an area where it sounded a little bit more like soundtrack or composition. Right. And there were some vocals on it, and but that specifically, I think Johnny Campbell, the director of the Casual Vacancy, had heard and was intrigued at the way that we'd worked about it, because I think that was kind of our, oh God, it's so hideous talking about it as a selling point, but it's different. It's a different way of working, where you go, I want to go to the locations, because the locations, it was incredible. Getting out of the studio was just a blessing, because those rooms with the aircon, just channeling just the most horrible air over and over again, and you're just staring at the screen and you're going, why won't it work? And you're screaming at the computer, and then finally you get this moment where you're like, why don't we go out and record some stuff? I don't know, it sounds a bit wanky. No, let's just do it. And you're like, okay, fine. So you go to the locations, and you get a bit of a feel of the area and a feel of the kind of I don't know. Both times we've done this, we've had a bit of history there anyway. Just because in Ireland I'd been there as a child, and
Right.
and for the Casual Vacancy we'd been in my auntie and uncle are from the area where it was filmed, and so spending time in location before it's shot, using field recordings of the area. So for Ireland it was lots of the sea, the waves, the caves, specifically the reverbs, acoustics in the caves, those recordings, and then local musicians. And I mean, obviously you have to be careful what you record, but there's always, especially with folk music, it's ridiculous. They're just so giving, and so you get those recordings and those experiences, and then also just the traveling around just gives you so much of a kind of. We always try and get a transient kind of quality in what we write, or it just is there anyway. Right. And when you're traveling around these places, you get a real kind of movement-based tempo to things, and a kind of a filmic quality to it anyway, because of the kind of pace or the pulse for film that's flowing towards a storyline, and those were kind of, and also we were really interested in working before picture.
Yeah, that's very unique, and I really love that I love music that kind of originates before picture, because I think that music influences picture, at least from my standpoint, and then I think that should be the case every time. I know it can't be because of scheduling and everything, but it's really
totally
amazing that way.
Well, I think that some of the earlier films in my life, definitely like Scorsese and people, they were using tracks that worked on their own,
right?
And they put it to picture, and that's what was so magical about it. Of course it's going to work. Of course it's going to work because this song on its own stands and means something and has a whole thing going on even before you put it to picture. And to make the thing just work to that picture, and when you take that picture away, it seems a bit empty. I don't know. It just, if you have that possibility to try and write something that you're happy with already and has captured a moment and has meaning to it and is like a fully fledged, thing, I guess, then you're already off to a winning. And also the just the kind of language you have with the director when you've done that already. I always think when someone hears the growth of a tune, it was quite weird for us because we'd never obviously had anyone. We'd been so protective over our music before we did anything like this, and to suddenly have a director listen to demos and say, "Oh, that's great. I'm not really feeling that as much." God, you feel really exposed, but it's brilliant because they're on that journey, A, with the music already, and B, they're filming and editing and that is already in the language of what they're making. You're not trying to replace the temp track, the temp track at all. You're not trying to replace Taverner, which you never can. You're not trying to replace. You just can't do that. You've already got a kind of language with each other, which is brilliant for the. I mean, it means a lot more work though.
Yeah.
You basically have to give an editor like really high quality demos and give them to them enough in advance for them not to sort of not know them well enough and have an identity with them. But the brilliant thing about that is that you kind of give up that ownership of where and what that tune means within the story, which is amazing because you go, especially when we were writing before we'd seen anything, there were moments that you're like, oh my God, yeah, of course that's that moment in the story. Oh, this is that. And then in fact, when we started handing them to them, the director said, can you stop naming them things that might tie in with that moment, because there's such a great bit of improvisation, like creativity in putting it up to completely different areas of the story.
Right.
So then we had to give real generic names to everything, and then you'd find these pieces that you'd written about completely a different moment in mind or a completely different kind of emotion, and it was put against something else. You're like, oh God, that's bold. Don't do that. And then it started to work. It was great. It was really freeing, and it's just brilliant to have that kind of back and forth and not to just work completely where you are and go, yeah, no, and then go back to the drawing board. Yeah, no,
right,
it's it's all building up to each other.
So when you're writing the music and you're pretty much kind of giving them to the editor and the director, and they're kind of I guess making the score connect to the picture. Do you ever write to picture at all for Casual Vacancy?
Yeah, you have to when it starts getting more picture locked.
Okay.
And things are getting juggled around. And also, especially with something like, we're still getting to grips with how much music you have to write, and there's still so many gaps as well and things like that. But the kind of playing is a lot more open. You're not so rigid about notes because you've already started like that, and they're not so rigid. And we ended up using quite a lot of our own music as well that we'd written before. So we gave them a load of stems before it started, because I was watching, I think I might have misremembered this, but when have you seen Her?
I actually have not. It's one of the movies that slipped by me that because I love Spike Jonze, but I didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, it's brilliant. It's great. But I obviously, they when Butler did the soundtrack, but then there's also Supersymmetry off their latest albums in it as well. Mm-hmm. And I found it really, Tom and I talked about it a lot, and we found it really interesting that you can have an identity within the whole piece, which is, brand is hideous, but it's kind of your music, and then also you interweave your music as a band as well.
Right.
And whether that, Johnny, especially with the Casual Vacancy, was really a fan of our music as well, and was interested in us really kind of a categoric ownership of all the music within the piece. And so when we first gave them everything, we gave them all the stems from all our music as well. Some of the synth tracks could work on their own, or maybe some of the string lines can work on their own, and they used it, and they started interweaving that as well. So although it was a complete minefield of rewriting certain bits of our album or releases, it was weird. It started to, we wrote everything. Like, I think there's obviously some, for the Casual Vacancy, there is some temp tracks, but not that many at all. Like, we were so specific. We were writing music that happened in the other room. That's how ridiculous it got. Like, we were playing the music that the twins were listening to in the room next door, which we'd written it, like, we tried to write something really sexy and kind of overtly, I suppose, young girls finding out about boys and sex and puberty and things like that, while this couple were losing all the sexual kind of drive in their relationship. And we thought, let's write that. So the girls are next door going to go, wow, yeah, this is, and listening to really sexy kind of D'Angelo, deep, like new wave kind of music. And then this couple were having this conversation where they were like, come on, I want to have, like, where is it? Come be a man. And that was quite fun, start playing with the storyline that way. So then we started playing music on documentaries on TV and some of the classical kind of nuances of British heritage music.
Wow.
Music, what you think we should be listening to, and putting that on and it's just great fun. God, it's so much more work. It really is, but it's so much more fun because you just have so many different aspects of the storytelling that you can start to dip into. You can do what the characters are listening to. You can play with, I guess it's like, if you're thinking about it in theatre terms, it's like fourth wall and all that stuff. Right, you just get a little bit deeper. God, I'm going on so much. Sorry.
Oh no, this is so interesting because
I haven't talked about it for ages, and we're both really, really passionate about it, and I guess we're so early on. We're still we're still newbies, so there's still that sort of excitement about it. I'm sure I'll be completely weary and not and be monosyllabic in about a few years, where I explain how little money there is in it and I hate it. But it's great fun. It's just really lovely when you work with someone who's genuinely really excited about it and up for collaborating.
It just sounds like the way you're talking about it. It's just, I would never have thought this process would have been applied to a 3-part miniseries, and it just sounds. It's incredible. I kind of wish I was following you guys with a camera and making a documentary. This is...
Oh, come on. Yeah, well, we'll do it. If we get a job, if you do that. Do you actually do that?
I do production, yeah.
You should do that. If we do something I tell you what, if we do something in America, like I don't think we've even got representation out there yet, but if we do something out there, Like you are so welcome to do that. If we try and do the same process,
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
if you'd be interested. Anyway, look,
Of
no
course.
pressure, but I think it's quite interesting. If it works, it's great. You
Right.
just need to make sure that it's not you're not really overprotective about it. You know that someone's up for doing it, and you can't be too, you know, just too earnest about it all. Like some things are awful. Some things you do are really bad. You go, oh, like I think this might work, and it just sounds awful. But
Right.
I'll tell you one other thing that was great is doing field recordings. Sometimes brings up some really interesting things that you would never have thought about. So when we first started visiting the area for the Casual Vacancy, there was like a few boxes to tick, which were sounds of the forest, the birds and stuff, just identifying with it. The sounds of the bells, because specifically Stroud is in this beautiful valley, and there's about 6 or 7 churches which have their own kind of bell tolling, which sounds completely different, but it's so identifiable with the valley and the sounds of that area. And then also we wanted to record the river, which is such a important identity within it's its own character within the whole piece. And there's lots of metaphors about the river within the whole piece anyway, but we wanted to record that. And what else? There was like a number of things. Morris dances as well. We wanted to record Morris dances, and we did all of that stuff. But specifically doing the river was a nightmare. And every time we tried to get a recording, someone would start up their lawnmower again. It was so annoying. So then we got our recordings. We were a bit sort of deflated by it. And we got back to the studio, and when we listened to it, obviously through the speakers, turning up the low end, it was really ominous. It was like someone had put a synth drone underneath it. So we were like, oh, that's great. And so we started cutting and pasting and making it long and putting synths underneath it. I think we used a CS80, maybe a Jupiter. And then we started putting some cellos underneath it as well. And it became a piece within the score. Not one that we've released, but it was so useful to use that. And it was so, it was where they filmed it. B, the director knew the history of how we got to it. And C, it was kind of, it was a little bit inventive. It was different. And you get that in different ways in the studio. And we know those ways, and we have lots of methods to make it interesting and different when we work. But stuff like that, it's just great. It's really good fun. And it's kind of an authenticity to stuff.
I mean, I just hearing you talk about it makes me want to. It's so inspiring. It just wants me to go out and make something. It's so. Just love this creative process. I mean, it's the most. I don't really have to ask any questions. It's so informative.
Sorry, I'm rabbiting on. It's only because I'm excited.
It's brilliant.
But Tom. So another thing is Tom's a brilliant pianist and keys player. And when we did the Hannah EP, we started using organ, which was just really powerful for us because we were really interested in those banks, a kind of wall of sound. When you use, it was quite on the early days when we first started doing it. It was a quick way to get a sound that we would not fall in love with, but be okay with. Because specifically when you're in front of a computer all day and you're trying to come up with stuff, sometimes everything sounds awful and there's nothing that can grab you emotionally. But when we started coming up with the way of putting organ, synths on top, strings, and then samples on top, you get this kind of wall of sound which Tom could play quite quickly, and we could both kind of maneuver a chord change into sort of a way that it was pleasing enough to our ears to stick with it for more than 10 minutes.
Right.
And when we started writing like that, things like, I don't know if you've heard the Dahana EP, but like Green or Revelations from the Casual Vacancy thing, those are tracks that are written in that kind of way. So you kind of bank up a load of different things and start playing chords with them, and it has such a powerful, I don't know, it's a bit 90s, but it's also classical in the way that it's so rich. And then we started using, the studio's opposite a church. And I went over there and met Father Will, who was really lovely and very sweetly let us use the organ, because we were just, why not?
Right.
Why not? So
Yeah.
because we've got these two AKGs which we use for most of our recordings, and you can set them up. We did it for the Irish project where we set it up in a few places and just got some great recordings, specifically in churches. And then so we used the church across the road and recorded the Drowning, Revelations, even the opening theme, which we haven't released yet, all in that church. It's just great. It's really brilliant having that kind of. And actually, while we were doing it, we ended up recording a load of other stuff, just putting the microphones in weird places and using different, the stops, pulling out different stops and record. Like we used a ribbon right up next to the pipes, so you can really hear the air coming out.
Wow.
And just replaced a load of the stuff that was very dronal and interesting, but just not 3D, if that's not too a poncy word to use.
No, yeah,
The
no, yeah,
idea
yeah.
that when we first did stuff with plugins, we were constantly trying to re-record them through like amps to give them a kind of just a bit of air and a bit of 3D nature to them. And that's kind of what we do with the plugins that we use. It's so easy to get up a good string sound with Vienna strings and use an organ from Contact or something like that. But as soon as you start replacing those things, it's just all those little things start to make a difference. And it's just great. It's just a lovely way of. I think we're really, really happy with making those decisions early on, which is like, oh God, what, you want to record the real thing? Oh no. That means like we're gonna have a day out and we have to do that. And then now it's just great. It's like it's part of the method, and we've it's only in about 10 years when we get really difficult about it. And it has to be the organ in the temple church in the center of town, and we have to pay $10,000 to use it, all that stuff. That's when it's going to get ridiculous, and I'll start wearing really ridiculous high-collared clothes and a silly hat and pointy shoes, and I won't ever laugh again. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with it at the moment.
I mean, the way that you talk about it, it's just such an organic way of working, and I think, some composers are kind of doing that a little bit, and it's not a lot. I know, just the variations of kind of how you described going at, like Marco Beltrami for his score for The Homesman, he took his entire orchestra out on the hills of Malibu behind his studio, and they recorded outside the whole orchestra, and he set up this kind of pipe along the hill so that the wind would hit the metal, and he'd put like the microphones on it and get this like synthetic drone with the wind. And I'm like,
oh wow,
it's just like,
see, Tom would love that.
Yeah.
I wish Tom was here. Tom would absolutely love that. He'd be like, right, we've got to do that next.
Yeah, I'll send you the video. They added a Varese.
Oh please,
that sounds video brilliant. Of them working, and it's it's really unique. And just hearing.
Well, Christobal, have you heard of? I can't remember his full name. I think it's Christobal, the guy who did Utopia.
Utopia. I'm not sure.
Oh, I think so. At the moment, I think Finch is going to be making the series.
Oh, okay.
Remaking it. But the guy who did it in England uses loads of samples from the actual show itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have these weird. I mean, a lot of the time people are really scared of words or lyrics or sung voices in soundtrack, specifically, like spoken word.
Mm-hmm.
But he uses loads of like samples from the actual. I'm pretty sure that they're samples from the actual show itself, from the scenes, and it's fascinating. I mean, everyone absolutely loved that over here, and I'm sure that's why Finch has got his hands on it, because it's quite an interesting project overall. But the music in it was brilliant, and I know that he. I mean, like, there's so many of them that have got so many fascinating ways of working. I keep thinking, oh, like, we're doing this, but then there's about 4 or 5 other people that have done it for years.
Yeah. But I mean, I just kind of just maybe one little looking at the Casual Vacancy. When you guys first started on it, like when you first heard the story, when you first talked with the director, and before you went on this amazing journey, like, what was the first thing that spoke to you guys from the story? Like, it definitely influenced you to go out there to the locations, but was it the story, the characters, the setting? I mean, what was really kind of did the first initial creative spark that was like, okay, the music has to be spoken from here. This is where the music is coming from. Like, where did it kind of first originate?
Well, all three of us are from areas that are pretty much exactly where the Casual Vacancy is set. I mean, when I say three of us, that's Tom, myself, and Hamish, our manager, who all went into that very first meeting with Johnny and Ruth, the producer. And we were just really, I remember we met beforehand for about half an hour before we went in there, and we were just all in exactly the same connection with it. We had the same, we were in the same position, that we had a real identity to the characters in it. We had a real identity to the story, the reasons why it was being told, and specifically that it was in that they were filming in that area, and I'd spent so much of my childhood there, and Tom knows, all my family that are there, and it was basically like, look, we can get in a car tomorrow and drive there.
Yeah.
And we can stay at my family's house, and we can walk around, and we can, we already started talking about areas that we could go to record, and I felt like we were really passionate, and we really, really wanted it. Like, it was a big job. It is a big job for us. We are a band. We've done all right in the past few years, but we definitely, we want those guys for the Casual Vacancy. It was a real leap job, and it was a bit of a, it was a bit of leap of faith on their side. But we had a really good meeting, and we were really, really passionate about it. I can't believe we got it. Yeah. And yeah, we worked on it for ages as well. Like, we were involved so early on.
We had to be, to do this.
Yeah, we had to be, yeah. I mean, that's kind of, that's the thing. I don't know. We're gonna have to. I'd love to work like this from now on, but who knows if we can command that kind of process. But it is worth it. If someone was in the kind of, if they really loved what we did and they hadn't started filming yet, there is a chance that we might get to do that again.
Right.
but yeah, we were all just really passionate about doing it, and also I felt like Tom and I especially were really interested in doing the range justice. So being able to write classical music, which is identifiable with our famous Elgar and Vaughan Williams composers from our history, and also on the other end writing music that was either from that kind of area, that's not far from Bristol, which is Portishead and Massive Attack and things like that were so influential to us when we were children, and also the music that we identify with, and the label that we were signed with at that point, Black Butter, which is lots of sort of the track Twilight is kind of is a real sort of little picture into that world, the young vocal, the female vocal, the innocent voice, the sort of electronic music that is really, Black Butter are doing so well at the moment as a label, releasing those kinds of tracks, and to be able to write something like that next to a classical piece like The Drowning, which has got an operatic part to it, is just, it's really, if someone goes for that and lets you do that kind of that varied score, then it's amazing. It's it was perfect. It was just what we wanted to do.
Right. Well, I'm so happy that you were able to do that. That's a amazing journey. And thanks so much for sharing it out. But yeah, Joe, thank you so much for your time today, and it's,
no problem,
and it's
mate.
been a real enlightening and inspiration to listen to your guys' story.
Well, stay in contact. We'll see you when we get out there.